Shalom, 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 Bawachim Ba'im. Welcome to Torah Mussar Mindfulness, where we here at the Institute for Holiness, Kehilat Mussar Mindfulness, join in a weekly public offering of looking at the weekly Torah portion of the Hebrew Bible from the lenses of Mussar in the Jewish tradition, and mindfulness from Theravada Buddhism, from the Dharma. I am Rabbi Chasya Uriel Steinbauer, the founder and director of Hamachon Kedusha, the Institute for Holiness. I'm delighted that you are either joining us live streaming on our YouTube channel, please subscribe, or on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you may be joining us. Or you may be joining us live link on a Zoom link where you've been welcome to join us. And for all of you joining us on our website at kehilatmussar.com, KEHILATMUSSAR.com. You're welcome to subscribe there, where you'll receive our newsletter, and you can visit the blog page where you'll have access to all the videos and audio of this type of session called Awakening Torah Mussar Mindfulness. Today is here in Haaretz in Israel, Friday, September 13th, about 2 a.m. here. We're up late to make this accessible to all of our followers in Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asian countries, where it is later in the day there. For those of you joining us on the other side of the world, United States, Canada, down into South America, you, of course, range from early afternoon to late afternoon. And of course, those in Europe, hopefully you're sleeping and we'll watch this recording later. So what do we jump in to do? As you know, today we'll be covering Devarim. Devarim is the first Torah portion in the book of Devarim, known as Deuteronomy in English. And that took place on the reading calendar on August 10th. So a while ago, like over a month ago. And it took place on the Hebrew calendar of the Vav of Av. So the 6th of Av in Tafshin Pei Dalet 5784. Today, the Hebrew date is the 10th of Elul. Welcome. I hope that you are in the midst of all the Elul, the Hebrew month of planning for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and all of the festivals of essentially returning to Shuvah. So if you've been following along, you know what comes next. If you're new, we essentially will move through our intentions for today's session, our kavanot. Then we'll do a summary of the Torah portion, and then we'll look at what is it that our ancestors and God want us to get out of the Torah portion so that we can use it as part of our path today. And that path being Mussar mindfulness, of how to be on this lifelong journey towards holiness, to become the best version of ourselves in service of God and service of others. So that leads me to our kavanot, our intentions. Have vision, and you are watching on video. You will see 3 different kavanot in English here. If you are listening on podcast or audio later, I'm going to summarize them, which is that we see this about an hour together as an act of radical self-care. This is really a spiritual discipline that we're doing to strengthen our own souls. Now, what does that mean? In order to be a benefit to others in the future. We're also doing this on behalf of others. We want to strengthen our relationship to others, to be a better conduit of God's good when they need us. And we're also doing this threefold relationship, the self, other, and the Almighty, to strengthen our relationship to the divine, however we define the concept or God, divine, and whatever that relationship is. We're doing this to strengthen that relationship. so we can be a better conduit of God's good to others when they need us. So may we merit this today, that in our learning and in our mindfulness meditation towards the end, may we merit really fulfilling these intentions, these kavanot. So if you were watching and have vision, I just removed the shared screen of our kavanot. So now I'm going to go ahead and share our summary of what's going to happen today. So just to let you know, if you're following along and haven't subscribed yet on our YouTube channel, we do this, God willing, every week for all the Torah portions for the whole year that come out of Shabbat. And we are on, I don't know if we're on 43 now or 42. I need to take a look. Yes, today is 43. This is our 43rd sitting where we are engaging and learning together. So may Hashem, God, give us strength to continue. So what happened in Devarim? We left all the other books before us, right? We had Bereshit, which is Genesis in the beginning of what was going on and all the beautiful stories there. And then, of course, we had Shemot, which is Exodus, where we followed our ancestors out, being taken with a strong hand by God out of the institution of slavery, and all the stories associated even before that with our ancestors, the three patriarchs and actually four matriarchs and two more, who some people count and some don't, as in a sense. And then we moved, of course, out of Shemot, the book of Shemot, and really began to explore all the laws, all of what it would take for a people who essentially were in the institution of slavery, what would lead them out to be able to begin to live by a rule of law, and how to survive together, how to practice, how they were going to live together, essentially, right? So this happens in Vayikra, right, which is known as Leviticus, okay? And we get a whole set of how we're going to live by a rule of law. And next comes what is known as Numbers, Bamidbar. And Bamidbar, which is the stories that happen of the 40 years, essentially, in the desert, in the wilderness. And so now, of course, we are entering Devarim, which is Deuteronomy, which is essentially our beloved teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu, his final speeches, his final words that he feels almost like an ethical will that he needs to depart with before he passes away. So it's now in the 40th year of wandering in the Midbar, in the wilderness, and our ancestors, Bnei Israel, are almost ready to enter Eretz Israel. Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher Moses, gives a very long speech reminding the people of their journey after leaving Har Sinai. So this is how it opens. Moshe retells the story of how he needed help to judge Bnei Israel, the children of Israel's questions and legal cases, so he appointed judges to govern the people with him. Moshe then reminds Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, the Hebrews, of the story of the Meragalim, the sometimes called spies, the scouts, who gave a negative report about Eretz Israel. Bnei Israel listened to these scouts, meaning there was a lot of reactivity when we say listen, and they fully internalized their message, essentially, right? And they were punished. No one from that generation besides Caleb and Yehoshua would enter the land. God tells Moshe that Bnei Israel should not fight against certain people, one of them being Seir, the descendants of Esau. Also, that they are not to fight Moab and Ammon, the descendants of Lot, who is, of course, related to Abraham. Bnei Israel defeat the armies of Sichon and Og. Their land that is east of the Yarden of the Jordan River is given to the Shevatim, the tribes of Reuven, Gad, and Hetzi Menashe, half of the tribe of Menashe. Moshe reminds these tribes, the Shevatim, that they must cross into Eretz Israel, into the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, which will become the land of Israel, and fight with the rest of Bnei Israel before settling there. So that's essentially a quick summary. What I first want to point out to you is this is let's look at what Moshe decided to share. He's starting to talk to the people as they're about to enter. Out of 40 years of experience and memories, these are the ones he selected to begin to remind them, or for those who've never did, obviously who didn't live through it, are just getting the story of it. These are the ones that he chose. So he chose to talk about when he couldn't bear the burden. He actually didn't even ask for help then, if you recall this. What happens is his father-in-law, Yitro, shows up to visit him and also to bring him his wife and children. And he notices that Moshe Rabbeinu is sitting, basically adjourning as a judge outside his tent, day and night, hours and hours and hours. And he looks upon this with his own wisdom and insight and says, this is not healthy. This is not right. This is not good. If you continue down this path, you're going to have burnout, and you're going to burn these people out, because they'll get sick of coming to the same person and only one person to handle every single case, from small to very large, very important, chashuv, and you'll get burnout. And then it'll just end up having really unpleasant negative effects on everyone. So this is what Yitro says in his great wisdom to his son-in-law. And the son-in-law listens to him. Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, listens to him and essentially agrees to appoint other judges to handle the legal cases, right? These are appointed judges who, of course, in order to be appointed judge, as Moshe reminds us in this Torah portion, they have to be someone who is God-fearing, who will be won't take bribes, that people look to as someone who is full of wisdom, humility, just key midot, key soul traits that are very strong and balanced. And this is the story he decides to start with, where he basically says, I needed help to judge. So he internalized the story of Yitro, but he doesn't mention his father-in-law at all. He doesn't mention that a non-Jew, a non-Hebrew, someone outside of Bnei Israel, who he happens to marry into that family, notices in his great insight and wisdom and gives him advice that is completely profound and changes the whole judiciary system of the children of Israel in the desert. And I don't think this is a small thing. I'm actually surprised by it and disappointed. And this is one of those practices when we're learning Torah together that we should feel that we be able to say, I feel disappointment. Where do I feel the disappointment in my body? Why do I feel disappointed, right? I feel disappointed because in our tradition, it's very much taught, especially if you've learned it all in yeshivot, in Jewish houses of learning, that you always cite who you're quoting, who gave you such insight or wisdom. Always cite your teachers, always quote them. And for Moshe to not do this, I just want to hold on to that. Like, is there something going on? Is there something missing? It's very important to look at what story is being told and what's missing, right? And to know that a story is being told. It's a narrative of what had happened and what one person thinks is very important and how they choose to tell it. And I want us to hold on to that during today's teaching, because we here in Israel and all the Jews in the diaspora and all of our allies who are supporting us after the genocide of October 7th done by jihadists, Palestinian terrorists, proxies of Iran, that many people have a certain narrative, story of what had happened, what is happening, or all the wars and missiles and fighting that had happened since October 7th. And so we want to be able to use this muscle, this spiritual skill and muscle that we're using by analyzing the Torah in our daily practice of when we're listening to stories of what happened on October 7th and afterwards, that it is a narrative. It doesn't mean it's not true. What happened to Moshe is true. If narratives and stories are true, but often we are either leaving out certain things, or it's important what the person is saying, that we need to gain insight into how they're telling it and why. What is the important thing they want us to know? So Moshe here really wants us to know that he needed help. And that wasn't clear during the original story. He didn't know he needed help. Yitro noticed that there was a problem that would eventually lead to burnout, and he let Moshe know. And Moshe, in his wisdom, listened to that before he was burnt out. He listened to that. I mean, that actually takes a lot of humility and wisdom to listen to somebody who's telling you that your behavior is not healthy, that it's eventually going to lead to burnout that's going to hurt you and the people. And you have an opportunity to do something about it now. This is very important to us today. All of us have to listen. Do we need help? Should we be seeking it? Should we be listening to others when they notice that we are not doing something so healthy that's eventually going to lead to burnout? So an example of this, for instance, from a lot of my practitioners on this path, when I teach groups of Mussar mindfulness, will say to me, I'm watching all the new news clips. I'm looking at social media all the time of what's happening in Israel. And I will say to them, must you look at the social media and news and the Go cameras and everything that happened? Must you look at that? And must you look at it, the amount that you are? There has to be wise discernment practiced. And perhaps my voice will be like Yitro's and say, it's not healthy to spend hours each day looking at the images, for instance, of the sadistic violence of what happened on October 7th and afterwards, or what's happening to the hostages, or what happened to them, or God forbid, what happened to our lovely Jewish children up in the Golan. I mean, you just name it. Like, we don't have to, and we shouldn't be looking at those images over and over again. If you must look once, but not over and over, and then listening to these voices that are so ignorant and full of hatred, it's not life affirming, and it's going to burn us out, and it's going to hurt us as a nation and people. So that's what Moshe comes to teach us, is that he's telling us, I need help. Or that wasn't clear when the actual event really took place, the way the Torah recorded it. Okay, so the second thing, all right, these central stories. Excuse me. Wow. I will say one more thing about that lovely story, is that, and I should give you a little history. What else went on here? Moshe has to use a very particular language when he tells that he had to go and appoint the leaders. The verb use is not appoint. He had to like lakachat. He had to like take them. He had to, the language and the meaning, and especially if you look at other contexts in which that verb is used in the Torah, is that he had to make these people be the appointed leaders, meaning there was a reluctance there. And we can understand that. How can we understand that? These are going to be the first set of leaders, of appointed judges that happen among the people Israel as they're becoming a people. I mean, they were a people, they were a set of tribes, but now they're really a people that are really starting to live through and by rule of law. They're the first appointed outside of Moshe. Until then, it was Moshe leading and then Aharon, and now there's going to be this new set of leadership. And that's frightening. It's frightening because, one, they got to witness how the people treated Moshe, how many times they argue with him, how they almost potentially stone him to death, how there's constant challenges and arguments. And they look at that and think, I don't want that. I don't want to go through that. So it's like they shrink in their responsibility and shrink to too much humility, too much anava. When they need to step up, take up their proper amount of space, because they have been appointed, they've been taken, they have to do this work. So it's both the midot of responsibility and humility when balanced. So we too today, some of us become leaders because of the conditions of life force it upon us. For instance, I think of Hirsch's, may his memory be for a blessing. His parents, lovely people. I'm sure they led in their kind, gentle way in their communities before October 7th. But nobody knew of Hirsch's parents outside of their community in Yerushalayim in Jerusalem. And all of a sudden, their son is brutalized and kidnapped, taken as a hostage into Gaza. And suddenly they are, and they have a decision for them. Are they going to lead? Are they going to do everything in their power and the resources that they have, being dual citizens, one of them being of the most powerful country in the world, the United States? Are they going to use the responsibility and resources at their fingertips to do everything they can to bring their son back? They were thrown into based on the conditions of life. They didn't choose that. They didn't, like on October 6th, be like, I want to be a leader of Israel and of the world. No. October 7th happened, and this is what happened. So the same today. It's now September 13th. We've already gone into the 11th month of this war. Our hostages still in Gaza. And many of us have to look with wise discernment. What is my position here? What is my responsibility? Should I be leading in some way, even small leadership in my local community? What is it that I can do to bring God's good to others, to be a benefit to others? And so this text is brought to us and handed down to us by our ancestors for a reason, to constantly be doing that reflection, as we should be doing all year, but especially during Chodesh Elul, during the month of Elul. Okay? So I'm going to move on to the next story, but I want to make sure that I give you a quick summary for those of you, see if there's anything that I missed. Essentially, I think I can provide this even later on, but there are key themes all throughout Deuteronomy, Devarim, like the mistrusting and disobeying of God lead to disaster. This will be told again and again in the story. Trusting and obeying God lead to a success. Okay. These themes are essentially expressed by how God brought Israel to the border of the land and then placed it at their disposal, how their fear and refusal to march in the land despite that God reassured them that God would help lead them to defeat the Amorites and the condemnation to death in the wilderness, and how the next generation's trust in God and obedience to God's commands lead to their victories of powerful kings. So this goes on and on through these speeches of Moshe to exhort the people to obey God's laws, to live by this rule of law, and to approach the battles with trust and confidence. So this is going to be the ongoing theme of trusting God in battle, during war, that God will fight for Israel, okay? So I want to say one very important thing that's going to affect us, and it should always be there for us, okay? The Torah is a gift to us because it is our ancestors' way of showing that their relationship, their religious belief, I don't even want to call it religious, just their whole being is based mostly on their experience of God, meaning the relationship and the actual experience of God, rather than on theological speculation. Theological speculation, for those of you who might not know what that is like, I believe that there's a God, I think there's a God, and then they'll try to like show ways that God exists, or that there is one God, or that there is a divine ruler, things of that sort that go on and on for centuries. Like even later on, Jews in the diaspora, even famous ones like Rambam and others, will go through such theological speculation. But for our ancestors in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible, their belief is in their bones from their actual lived experience with God. And that is very profound on many levels, because they're able to trust what they know and what they don't know. And it also should show us that you can know something through direct experience and are still going to fight with it and maybe choose not to be in relationship with it, or not believe that it's really going to save you or be there for you. Okay? And that's incredible. And why am I even bringing this up? We Israelis, and especially those along the Gaza envelope and those in the north, and any of us who've been survivors of terror, we know Iran and its proxies and Palestinian terrorists. We know them in our bones because we've experienced them. It's not some theoretical speculation about how the Palestinians are or how Iran and its proxies are. We've experienced them. And that is different than any other Jew or non-Jew who hasn't had direct experience with them. And when you don't have direct experience, you're much more likely to do speculation, and you're much more likely to attempt to tell those who have had direct experience with them that they shouldn't base what they think and feel about them based on that direct experience, as if there should be some speculation about human beings in general that should be counted and weighted with that direct experience. And this is essentially one of the big splits in the world, particularly among, particularly sometimes even in the Jewish community. And this is important to understand, that we need to be obviously respectful towards one another, but to understand that sometimes people are are communicating and sharing from direct experience, and not some like ethical debate or discussion on what is the human being and what are individual rights, and as if everyone is the same, and every belief and practice out there is of equal ethical standards and worthy of all of our praise and attention and acceptance. It's just not the case, and we know it in our bones. So with that, I'm going to go into Moshe's next story before we move into our practice internalization of this. The next story, of course, is the Meragalim, the spies or the scouts. And he wants to emphasize that to the children now listening, who are about to enter the land, that their ancestors, not even ancestors, their parents and grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, that they listened to the fear of the scouts. They internalized it and allowed themselves to ride on the wave of reactivity, that they were punished and would not enter the land. Okay, he wants that message to get across. Now, what's so important about this lesson, about him sharing this, this one's a tough one, because for them to really hear him and get the message behind it is an unbelievable deep practice of awareness, of mindfulness. They have to be mindful that sometimes their people are going to come with fear and reactivity and doubt, which is, as you know, in the path of the Dharma, is it's the greatest hindrance to development and practice and cultivation, doubt. That sometimes our people are going to come with those things, fear, reactivity, and doubt. And it's up to us to notice if we're having reactivity and to not allow the reactivity to come out, to practice self-restraint and to choose to pivot to respond wisely, appropriately, as best we can. And if we do this as also part of a cultivation and practice of trust in God, that it's all going to be all right, that God is going to help us and be a part of the path of saving us, then we won't go down that same path of reactivity, of fear, of doubt, and then therefore receive the consequence of that behavior, which is that we're not entering the land, which means that we're not thriving in the land. And this is something that we need to take to heart and really listen to, that we have many of our own people right now, thank God, not the majority, but many who are acting out of fear, who are acting out of great reactivity, who are acting out of doubt. And we must practice not to react with them or even against them. We must listen, practice, respond as wisely, as appropriately as possible, to not go down that path. Because if we go down that path, we're not only going to hurt other people in our country, our leadership, we're going to hurt ourselves. We're going to embolden and strengthen the enemy within, and Iran and its proxies. This is why our ancestors passed this on to us. This is the message that Moshe was hoping would really, the people would internalize. That, listen, you're about to enter the land, you're going to fight certain people, you're not going to fight other ones. He's going to be sure to tell them that. You're not going to fight our descendants of Esav and Lot, who are related to us. You're going to fight Sichon and Og, right? That's who you're going to start with. Don't react when your people come with fear and reactivity and doubt. Don't do it. And I think this is probably the most difficult thing for him to get across. Sometimes it can't even get across. Sometimes we only can really learn this from direct experience, right? So that's why you have, for instance, families who still have their children and family members who are hostages, God forbid, in Gaza, of the Tikva, in English they call it Tikva Forum, it's Tikva, the Tikva Forum, who are supporting the policies of the government to fight and to make sure that Hamas does not remain in power and to hold on to the Philadelphia corridor. And they understand that this is larger than just about their hostage family, right? And you don't hear those voices. You don't hear those voices in social media as much or on the news. Instead, you hear the hundreds and thousands of people out in the streets in Israel who are acting out of fear and reactivity and doubt. So it's so important to pause and practice. So I think that's what I want to leave you with a couple of teachings. The first is, it's very much in our tradition that when we have an elder or a teacher or parents, that we ask them if they go ahead and they tell us that we can do something, or that, they listen to us talk about that we're going to do something, that we be sure to turn to them and ask, is this what they really want for us? So for instance, Gad, Reuven, and the half Menashe, the half tribe, they did not, in their manipulation, which I discussed last week, in order to get the land on the east side of the Yarden, of the Jordan River, they did not turn to Moshe and say, is this really what you want? And that was a grave mistake. And unfortunately, Moshe did not take up his proper amount of space as a leader at that moment. He didn't turn and say, without being asked, I don't want this. I don't agree with this. I know you're going to go ahead and still do it. And I know you're going to manipulate me into doing it, because otherwise you're not going to come and fight, and you're going to cause major chaos among all, essentially the 10 other tribes, 9.5 other tribes. But hear me out. I don't agree with this. Perhaps he remained silent because he didn't want to cause fear and doubt and reactivity if he said that out loud and the people heard it, to give him the benefit of the doubt. So let's quickly move through what I want to share with you here, and then we'll move into our sitting. I have my notes here. I had mentioned what was so important for Moshe to share, that he needed help judging the people. He starts to really communicate very clearly, and this is the gift of hindsight, that he needed help, that he couldn't bear the people by himself. He couldn't bear the burden of it alone, right? It was wearing him out. He's starting to be able to gain more tools, more language to describe his experience. I can't carry you myself. He goes on to share all this. And I had told you some time ago, it was actually quite tragic how much he was trying to communicate that to God, and that he didn't want God to fix it the way God kept trying to fix it, but rather to really see him and listen and go, oh, you really are overwhelmed. You can't bear the burden of this. I'll be with you. I will help bear the burden with this, right? I'll be with you. First, I'll actually just sit and listen to you, right? God's always this fixer. Quickly give him this, give him this, give him this, as if that's going to make it better. And he keeps coming back and saying, I can't. I don't want this. I can't do this. And we must listen to that voice ourselves, right? How often do we keep saying and keep doing, keep contributing, keep moving on, when really sometimes we have to be able to say, I can't do this alone, and I shouldn't do it alone, right? So the final couple things I'll share with you is this constant language that will be used that starts off here in this Torah portion, this concept of fear not, don't be dismayed, right? When they go into the land, don't fear the fighting or the other people. Don't be dismayed. It's spoken of again. This type of exhortation is one a very characteristic expression of religious feeling, if we're going to use that terminology, in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible, and actually even in the ancient Near East. Because the only thing you should be fearing for our ancestors and the ancient Near East and in the Hebrew Bible and Torah is the Almighty. It's in the very language of Avram, who will become Avraham, and even of the midwives, to say there's no fear of God here. If you have fear of God, you don't have to fear the humans. You don't have to fear anything else. If you have proper fear of God, which means you have what? An internal, strong moral compass. You know right from wrong. And so this is very much will come up in Devarim, this idea of fear not, don't be dismayed. Because if you're in alignment, who should you be fearing? Right? That lovely yirah, which means both awe and fear, something we don't have the language for in English, right? In Anglit. And the final thing I will say, which is, goes back to some sadness about this, two more things, is that, when the people actually say, in one of the stories he recalls, right, that Hashem, that God hates us, that God took us out of the land of Egypt, brought us out here essentially to kill us, that God hates us. And the language that's used, right? Here the people have received like the greatest blessings conferred on them. And they go on to say that it's really an act of hatred that God did what God did, which is save them and take them out of the institution of slavery. And what's really going on is a projection of their own hatred, their own ill will and delusion. When we have ill will and delusion, we will say that somebody hates us, right? But we really are the ones that are hating. And we see this. We see this with, for instance, the crowds in Israel who hate Bibi and blame him for everything, as if he's responsible and has the power to be responsible for all the wrongs of October 7th and all the fighting and wars afterwards. It is their projection onto him. They're the ones that are having ill will and delusion. And we have to be careful of this when we go on to be like, they say Bibi hates us, Bibi only cares about himself, Bibi this, Bibi that. It's shocking because this is what happens when reactivity. We become extremely narrow in our thinking, simple-minded, to think that one person is responsible and has the power to change things completely, as if there aren't any other parties involved or responsible, including a sadistic, crazy terrorist group called Hamas, in addition to Iran and its proxies. So it's showing the behavior of the powerless. When people feel powerless, they feel fear, They feel reactivity, they feel doubt, they feel all the things I mentioned. And then they project. And it's really hard not to get caught up in that, but that is our path, that is our practice. Okay, if we're really going to save ourselves and our people and our ancestral land, we have to practice and not get caught up in the wave of reactivity. The final thing I will say is that while Moshe will constantly remind the people that their relatives who are no longer with them, who died in the wilderness, that they doubted God's ability. Really, this is a projection again. They doubted their own ability. But this theme of like what he will see as faithlessness is really a faithlessness in themselves. And he will bring up that narrative again and again that we witnessed in Exodus and Numbers, when the opposite, the hafuk, that it was there. All these experiences demonstrated God's ability to meet their needs, right? But Israel will fail to see them and hold on to them. And it to the point where they will be so caught up in reactivity, they'll feel hopeless. And this is what we're witnessing. We're witnessing this among some Israelis right now, probably even some Jews in the diaspora. They're allowing themselves to get caught in the wheel of reactivity, to not be practicing menuchat hanefesh, development of equanimity, to be able to ride the waves of terror and violence and fear and reactivity and doubt. And that eventually leads to not only fighting and ill will and delusion, it leads to hopelessness. And nothing motivates Moshe more in Devarim, in this Torah portion that we're covering, than the need to overcome the people's failure to recognize God's capacity to meet all their needs, which is really their capacity to see that they're able, with God's help, to meet their own needs. And we have to remember that, right? Moshe is not going to be able to convince them of that. They have to convince themselves through daily practice. It helps to have a leader like Moshe constantly trying to remind you, you have the capacity, you can do this, right? So in that vein, in honoring my beloved ancestor, Moshe Rabbeinu, I stand before you today, Bezrat Hashem, God willing, to say, you have the capacity with God's help. And God also obviously has the capacity to help and save us and get us through this. And I want you to remember that, because times are hard and they actually might even get harder. We are not to give up hope. We are to practice. We are to pay attention if we're starting to feel reactivity. We are to say to ourselves, can I be with this? Can I pivot right now? And can I respond with wise discernment, with seeing clearly? And if I can't in that moment, if I really can't, I turn to God, I turn to others with help, right? And I pause and I choose not to act if I'm caught up in reactivity. Because if I act out of that fear, out of that ill will and delusion, out of that doubt, out of that reactivity, I'm just feeding it. And I'm hurting others. I'm hurting myself. So let's take that lesson passed on to us from God and our ancestors to heart. Let's move into our guided mindfulness meditation. If you're new to meditation, just follow my voice. I invite you to come to the edge of your seat if you are seated, with your feet firmly planted on the ground, planted with weight to feel that you're held by Mother Earth. deep in your sit bones to know that you are really weighted, grounded, especially if you feel unsure and not safe. Okay, you can always open your eyes and look around the room and know that you're safe and you're here. You're here with all of us practicing. So I invite you to put your hands wherever they're comfortable, wherever you want. And you can close your eyes if you feel safe and comfortable. Otherwise, just lower your gaze. Why do we lower our gaze? So we don't let in visual stimuli, right? Allow yourself to take 3 deep breaths. Inhalation and exhale. Inhalation, inviting mindfulness, inviting really being here together. Heart, body, mind, soul, spirit, inviting yourself like you're your best friend fully here. Inhalation and exhale. And then based on the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, this idea of inviting ease, really inviting ease with the inhalation and breathing out calm. Right, this real feeling that we can cultivate, we can invite ease, we can invite this real centering and calming. It's really important to practice this, to heal our souls, to heal us. We can get so caught up in reactivity and even responding that it's so important to take time out to be. So letting your breath fall to its own natural rhythm. So if you're anything like some of my students, some of my practitioners in our different Mussar Mindfulness Vadim, in our sanghas, you may be feeling guilt, regret, shame, either when even listening to this teaching or realizing that you got caught up in reactivity, along with so many in the streets, in our workplaces, in our cars, on the road, in the grocery store, the battlefield, wherever we may be. And a lot of people are coming saying, I really regret allowing myself to lose it, allowing myself to get caught up in someone else's story and narrative. And sometimes that regret is a healthy thing because that's a feeling inside that we know we're not living in alignment with our own values. It's a gift from God, actually. It's a little warning sign to say, hey, you got to wake up. It's time to pivot, return to your practice, return to your path. Right? We're talking about teshuvah, shuv, of returning this month. Part of that is realizing when you've gone off the derech, right? You've gone to reactivity, you've gone to fear, you've gone to doubt, you've gone to ill will, hatred, and delusion. So the first thing we do is realize that we've done that, right? And we try to approach ourselves with compassion, knowing that others have done this. This is common to humanity, to make mistakes, and to react. especially in very acute, high intense, which is turning into chronic situation of war. And so really having that healthy reflection that I'm not alone. Others have done this too. And a real nurturing, like, okay, I made a mistake. Thank God I caught it. I can stop. I can turn. I can pivot. I can return to God. I can return to my moral compass. I can return to that Nikudat Hashem, that pure element in my soul as a soul, untouched by the reactivity, untouched by the fear, untouched by the greed, hatred, and delusion, untouched by the doubt. And we want to pay special attention that healthy regret that I went off the path, that I allowed myself to get caught up in the reactivity, doesn't swim into the sea of guilt. Wow, I did something bad. Which then swims into the other sea of shame, of not only did I do something bad, and I am bad. Therefore, I am bad. And this is what can happen. This is what we talk about. The stimuli is the first arrow, right? And the stimuli here is you reacted. You got caught up in the fear and reactivity that's around us. And then the second arrow is when the guilt starts to come in. Hopefully, we have a healthy regret. We can quickly turn, continue with our practice and our cultivation. But the second arrow is, wow, I really did something bad. I'm so guilty. And the third arrow is, I'm bad. I am bad that I reacted, that I fell off the path. And all the stories and narrative that go with that shame, that busha. I am bad. I'm such a bad meditator. I'm so bad at this path. I can't practice. I can't really pivot and turn. I'm not so good at teshuvah. I should just give up. Oh, no one else is doing it. I'm too busy. I'm too fearful. The narrative and the movie and the story goes on and on. So this is why we sit and practice together, to strengthen each other, to be able to laugh at ourselves with a little bit of humor, to come at ourselves and our situation with curiosity, with what we call the beginner's mind. It's like, whoo, I got caught up in that reactivity. You might be coming at it from the other direction. I know I've been guilty of this, talking about guilt. I did regret it, and I went through a healthy process, which is having so much reactivity to seeing all the people with their angry signs and their angry words and the violence in the street. So much reactivity, anger, ill will. How could they do this? What message are they sending to our beloved children and families? fighting on our behalf in the north, the south, and Gaza. How could they do this to our people? How could they do this to the survivors who need our support and strength? On and on and on. And to realize, wow, I'm having so much reactivity to their reactivity, and I'm judging them, and I'm coming at it with ill will and fear that their reactivity is going to cause harm and suffering, more harm and suffering. And so I had to wake up to that and really feel it deep in my stomach, the pit, feeling it in my low back. Usually one of the telltale signs, right, is when you can't take a deep breath. God gives us so many signs. Always our companion, always strengthening us, always here. And then coming with compassion to my beloved sisters and brothers in the streets, that I see you, that I send metta, chesed, and loving kindness to you, that you may not know fear, that you may not know reactivity, that you may be free from doubt, that you may be free from ill will, that you may be free from delusion, that you may be free from small-mindedness and blaming, and sending them loving kindness, that they know that they are held, and that they are seen, and that they are loved, even when we feel that they are wrong. And then we send that metta, that loving kindness, out from the people in the streets to all those who are working to keep us safe, to defend us, from the police officers in the streets to our soldiers fighting on all borders. Sending them love, strength, and courage. May they not know fear. May they not experience hatred and delusion. May they be free from violence by those who hate us and seek our destruction. May they be free from any doubt that they are so loved and supported. And then we extend that loving kindness, that metta, out to the hostages and their families, to the survivors of October 7th from the Nova Festival, and from all the kibbutzim and moshavim along the Gaza envelope, to all those displaced, murdered in the north by the missiles of Hezbollah, all those displaced refugees in their own land, sending loving kindness and chesed. May they know that we love them. May they know that we will attempt to save them and help heal them with time. May they not know fear. May they not know ill will and hatred. May they not know doubt. May they know love. May they know compassion and strength, courage, sending them all the love, the capacity that you have in your heart right now. Knowing love as a poel, as a verb, we will do, each and every one of us, what we are capable of in our own capacity to strengthen Am Yisrael Chai. We will sit for a minute of silence, and then I will take you out of our meditation practice. Finally, in our deep courage, I'm feeling something I haven't felt before that I'm going to lead us in. I take this as shefa, as a chen of grace from God. I want to extend this metta, this chesed, this loving kindness to all our allies and supporters in Gaza, should there be any, who hate Hamas, who want to be free from the terror and the violence, who want to support Israel. And we send our love and courage and strength to them, sending them chesed to strengthen them. May they not know fear anymore. May they not be terrorized anymore. May they be free from violence. May they be free from indoctrination and hatred. If you had your eyes closed during this meditation practice, you may gently and slowly open them again. If you have the practice of bowing, please join me as I bow to Hashem, to God, for letting us arrive to this moment, for help carrying us through these teachings and through this meditation. Bowing to our ancestors for passing on these teachings and these practices and traditions to strengthen us. Bowing to our own pure soul and heart and discipline to engage in this practice and path together. Bowing to each other, the strength of the Vad and Sangha, and this path here at the Institute for Holiness, Kehilat Mussar Mindfulness. Thanking all of our donors and supporters for making this weekly public offering possible. Thank you. Do reach out with your continued support, either through the website of kehilatmussar.com, or you can also reach me via email, Rabbi Chasya at kehilatmussar.com, We accept sponsorships and donations for this weekly offering, either in memory of someone or in someone's honor. So may we continue on this path. In the month of Elul, we will be coming together soon to move into Ve'et Hanan as we continue through Devarim, through Deuteronomy. God bless you. Thank you for joining again. And for wherever you are, have a good rest of your day. Have a good night.